Jonathan couldn't believe his eyes as the once stable world he built crumbled around him. His company on the brink of collapse, his marriage shattered by secrets, and now, with nothing left to lose, a revelation from his wife would shake him to his core. Could everything he thought he knew be a lie? What he discovers next changes everything, leaving him questioning the very foundation of his life. Welcome to True Tales Authentic Emotions by Emma Blake, where the truth is often stranger than fiction. Jonathan stood at the altar, his mind racing as he caught a glimpse of his bride, Alexandra, entering the grand hall. The room was adorned with flowers and filled with elegantly dressed guests, but his focus was entirely on her. His heart pounded, not from love, but from a deep, unshakable unease that had been growing for weeks. As she approached, her radiant smile seemed to mock the dread gnawing at his insides. He had tried to push it aside, convinced that it was just pre-wedding jitters. But as Alexandra drew closer, the fear in his gut only intensified. Just as the ceremony began, a sharp chime from Alexandra's phone echoed through the hall. Her smile faltered as she glanced at the screen, her hand trembling slightly as she clutched her bouquet tighter. Jonathan noticed the change in her demeanor instantly. The joy that had once lit her eyes was gone, replaced by a shadow of dread. She quickly silenced the phone and looked up, her face now a mask of calm determination, but Jonathan saw through it. He knew something was terribly wrong, and his unease grew. As the vows were exchanged, Jonathan's mind drifted. What could possibly be troubling her? His thoughts raced, trying to piece together the fragments of doubt that had been plaguing him. He remembered the late-night phone calls she dismissed as nothing important, the distant look in her eyes whenever she thought he wasn't watching. He had ignored it all, chalking it up to the stress of planning the wedding. But now, standing here, he realized that something far deeper and darker was lurking beneath the surface. Alexandra's voice wavered slightly as she recited her vows, her eyes avoiding Jonathan's as she spoke. He felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He had never seen her like this, so composed yet so distant. It was as if she was a stranger, someone he had never truly known. His mind was a whirlwind of questions and fears, none of which he could voice in front of their friends and family. But one thought stood out among the chaos. What was she hiding from him? The ceremony ended, and as they walked down the aisle together, hand in hand, Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that this was all a facade. The applause of the guests echoed in his ears, but all he could hear was the sound of his own doubts, growing louder with every step. They smiled and waved, but Jonathan felt like he was sinking into quicksand, with no way to escape. He glanced at Alexandra, her face a perfect mask of happiness, and wondered if he would ever know the truth behind that smile. Jonathan's journey to success was not a straight path. He started with nothing but a fierce determination and a vision that many thought was impossible. Flashbacks reveal a younger Jonathan, fresh out of college, working tirelessly day and night, pitching his ideas to anyone who would listen. Rejection after rejection only fueled his ambition. He was driven by the desire to prove everyone wrong, to make a name for himself in the competitive world of business. His relentless work ethic and sharp mind eventually caught the attention of the right people, and his business began to take off. As Jonathan's company grew, so did his ambition. He expanded into new markets, always staying one step ahead of the competition. His sharp instincts and calculated risks paid off, and soon, he became a rising star in the business world. However, with success came new challenges. The higher he climbed, the more ruthless the game became. But Jonathan was undeterred. He thrived on the pressure, believing that his hard work and dedication would protect him from any fall. During this time, Jonathan met Alexandra at a high-profile charity event. She was stunning, with a beauty that turned heads wherever she went. But it wasn't just her looks that captivated him. It was the way she commanded the room with her charm and elegance. Jonathan was drawn to her like a moth to a flame, believing that someone as perfect as Alexandra would complement his success. He pursued her with the same determination he had for his business, and soon, they were inseparable. Alexandra's beauty was more than just skin deep, or so Jonathan believed. She became his muse, the woman who embodied the life he had always dreamed of. Together, they were the perfect power couple, admired and envied by all. Jonathan was convinced that he had everything he could ever want: success, wealth, and a beautiful partner by his side. But as we know, appearances can be deceiving, and Jonathan was about to learn that his perfect life was built on a foundation of lies. Even in the midst of his triumphs, there were subtle signs that Jonathan chose to ignore. Alexandra would often evade questions about her past, dismissing them with a playful smile. There were moments when her eyes would cloud over with an emotion Jonathan couldn't quite place, but he brushed these off as inconsequential, too caught up in his own success to see the cracks forming in the facade. Little did he know, these cracks would soon become impossible to ignore. Jonathan could sense something was off with Alexandra. She had been distant lately, and it was unlike her to keep things from him. Determined to find out what was troubling her, he decided to confront her gently. One evening, after dinner, he casually brought up the subject, trying to gauge her reaction. His approach was calm, yet his eyes searched hers for any hint of the truth she might be hiding. Alexandra, however, was prepared. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind, knowing that Jonathan would eventually notice her unease. With a soft smile, she brushed off his concerns, attributing her behavior to the stress of their recent marriage and the overwhelming responsibilities that came with it. She explained how the pressure to be the perfect wife, alongside the constant attention from the public, had taken a toll on her. She assured him that there was nothing more to it, just a need for some space and time to adjust to their new life. Jonathan listened intently, his brow furrowed with concern. He wanted to believe her, to accept her explanation at face value. But there was a lingering doubt in his mind, a feeling that there was more to her distress than she was letting on. Despite this, he decided not to press further, not wanting to push her away. He reassured her that he was there for her, no matter what, and that they would face any challenges together. Alexandra felt a wave of relief wash over her as Jonathan seemed to accept her explanation. She knew she had dodged a bullet, at least for now, but deep down, she was acutely aware that this was only a temporary reprieve. The secrets she harbored were too big to stay hidden forever, and she dreaded the day when Jonathan would inevitably discover the truth. For now, she maintained her facade, hoping that when the time came, she would be prepared for the consequences. As the days passed, Jonathan tried to dismiss the nagging feeling in the back of his mind. He threw himself into his work, hoping that it would distract him from the doubts that kept creeping in. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The thought of losing Alexandra haunted him, and he vowed to do whatever it took to keep their marriage intact, unaware of the storm that was brewing just beneath the surface. Jonathan decided to meet with Charles, Alexandra's father, to understand more about her past. He expected to find a man living in luxury, given Alexandra's refined appearance and high social status. However, upon arriving at Charles's modest home in a quiet, unassuming neighborhood, Jonathan was taken aback by the stark contrast. The small, simple house was a far cry from the lavish lifestyle he imagined. As Jonathan entered the house, he noticed the worn furniture and the peeling paint on the walls. The air was filled with the scent of old wood and a hint of dust, signs of a place that had seen better days. Charles greeted him with a warm smile, but Jonathan couldn't hide his surprise at the man's humble surroundings. Charles, with his thinning gray hair and deep-set blue eyes, had a calm demeanor that contrasted with the modesty of his living conditions. Jonathan was struck by the simplicity of Charles's life. The old man lived frugally, his clothes simple and worn, yet his eyes shone with a wisdom and peace that Jonathan hadn't expected. They sat down to talk, and as Charles spoke about his life, Jonathan listened with growing admiration and curiosity. The man before him was not the wealthy patriarch he had envisioned, but rather someone who had faced hardship with quiet dignity. The more Jonathan learned about Charles, the more he realized how different the reality was from the image Alexandra had presented. He began to understand that there was much more to Alexandra's past than she had let on. The revelation made him question everything he thought he knew about her, and a sense of unease settled in as he pondered the implications of this discovery. As Jonathan left Charles's home, the weight of what he had uncovered lingered in his mind. The encounter had opened his eyes to the complexities of Alexandra's life and the hidden struggles that lay beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect marriage. He knew that this was just the beginning of a journey that would reveal even more unexpected truths. Jonathan was suddenly under the scrutiny of the elite social circle he had long been a part of. They began to question his decision to marry Alexandra, probing into her background with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled judgment. At social gatherings, where whispers carried across rooms draped in luxury, Jonathan found himself defending his new family. The expectations placed upon him by society were immense, and the pressure began to weigh heavily on his shoulders. Meanwhile, Alexandra, always poised and graceful, felt the growing tension as well. She was aware that every move she made was being watched and dissected by the same people who once admired her from a distance. The weight of maintaining an impeccable image became more burdensome each day. Alexandra knew that any slip, any hint of the truth about her humble origins, could unravel the carefully curated life she had built with Jonathan. The pressure mounted as Alexandra attended a charity event, a staple in their social calendar, where the eyes of the elite were more piercing than ever. She moved through the crowd with practiced elegance, but beneath her composed exterior, her heart raced with anxiety. Every glance, every half-smile seemed to carry an undercurrent of suspicion. Alexandra forced herself to smile, her green eyes betraying a flicker of the tension she felt inside. As the evening wore on, Alexandra found herself surrounded by a group of women who, under the guise of friendly conversation, probed her with subtle questions about her family and past. The sharpness of their words cut through her defenses, and for a brief moment, her confidence wavered. She excused herself, retreating to a quiet corner where she could regain her composure, the pressure of keeping up appearances now almost unbearable. Jonathan noticed her absence and quickly found her. Seeing the strain on her face, he felt a pang of guilt. He realized that the life he had brought Alexandra into was far from the dream he had envisioned. As they exchanged a look, unspoken words passed between them. A shared understanding that the pressures from the outside world were beginning to take their toll on their marriage. Jonathan's company, once a beacon of success and innovation, began to falter. It started with a few minor setbacks, delays in project completions and miscommunications with clients, but soon the issues compounded. A critical contract that Jonathan had counted on fell through, sending shockwaves through the entire organization. The ripple effect was swift and unforgiving, with other clients losing confidence and pulling their business away. Jonathan found himself spending long hours in his office, surrounded by stacks of paperwork and financial reports that only seemed to bring more bad news. His once bright blue eyes were now clouded with concern as he struggled to find solutions to stem the tide. The pressure was immense, and every day felt like a battle against an impending collapse. As the days passed, the losses became more pronounced. Key employees, sensing the instability, began to leave, taking with them years of experience and trust. The office, once buzzing with energy and optimism, now felt cold and empty. The weight of the situation bore down on Jonathan, and the cracks in his once confident demeanor began to show. Alexandra, too, felt the strain of the situation. She had always been a pillar of support for Jonathan, but now she found herself struggling to maintain the facade of a perfect life. The pressure of their social obligations, combined with the financial strain, left her feeling isolated and overwhelmed. Despite her best efforts to stay strong, the tension between them grew as the reality of their declining fortune became impossible to ignore. With each passing day, the gap between Jonathan and Alexandra widened. The life they had built together, once filled with promise and hope, was now marred by uncertainty and fear. As the resources dwindled, so did their optimism, leaving them both questioning the future of their marriage and their once thriving business. The calm that Jonathan had desperately tried to maintain began to shatter when an unexpected figure from Charles's past re-emerged. This former business partner, a man with a history as dark as it was influential, arrived with a singular purpose: to leverage a secret that could destroy everything Jonathan had built. The tension in the room was palpable as this man hinted at knowing more about Alexandra's past than Jonathan ever could have imagined. His eyes gleamed with the promise of chaos, and his presence alone was enough to send chills down Jonathan's spine. As the threat of this man's revelations loomed over them, Jonathan's trust in Alexandra started to waver. The foundation of their relationship, already strained by recent events, began to crack under the weight of doubt and suspicion. Every glance, every word between them now carried a shadow of this unspoken truth, creating a rift that seemed impossible to mend. Jonathan felt as if he were drowning in a sea of uncertainty, with no anchor to hold on to. Desperation began to creep in as Jonathan grappled with the possibility that everything he thought he knew about Alexandra was a lie. The thought of being blindsided by a truth so devastating made him feel trapped and betrayed. He couldn't help but wonder how much of their life together had been built on secrets, and whether he could ever truly forgive her, no matter what the truth turned out to be. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming, leaving Jonathan teetering on the edge of a decision that could either save or shatter their lives. Jonathan's mind raced with doubts he had never entertained before. He began to question his ability to judge people, especially those closest to him. The realization that he might have been blind to the truth all along was paralyzing. He replayed every interaction with Alexandra, scrutinizing her words and actions, wondering how he had missed the signs. His confidence, once unshakable, now felt like a fragile facade, ready to crumble under the weight of his insecurities. Meanwhile, Alexandra was battling her own inner demons. The guilt of hiding her past was becoming unbearable, and the fear of losing Jonathan over it gnawed at her every day. She had thought that burying her secrets would protect their future, but now it seemed to be the very thing threatening to tear them apart. The dual burden of guilt and fear left her feeling trapped, unsure of how to move forward without destroying everything they had built together. As their individual struggles deepened, the distance between them grew. Jonathan withdrew into himself, consumed by his doubts, while Alexandra grappled with the overwhelming weight of her hidden truth. They both knew a confrontation was inevitable, but neither was ready to face it. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken fears, creating an invisible barrier that neither could cross, leaving them both isolated in their own turmoil. Jonathan and Alexandra found themselves at a crossroads, unsure of how to proceed with the overwhelming tension between them. Just as the weight of their situation seemed unbearable, Evelyn, a wise and compassionate mentor from their past, unexpectedly reached out. Evelyn had always been a source of guidance, but her involvement now was surprising. She had heard about their struggles and offered to help in a way only she could. Evelyn's presence brought a sense of calm, yet her solution was not without its complications. Evelyn suggested a plan that, on the surface, appeared promising. It involved leveraging her extensive network and influence to shield them from the looming threats, particularly the revelations that could destroy their relationship and reputations. However, her proposal also required a significant risk, one that would expose them to even greater scrutiny and potential downfall if it didn't succeed. Jonathan and Alexandra, desperate for a way out, couldn't ignore the hope that Evelyn's plan offered, despite the tension it added to their already strained relationship. The decision to trust Evelyn's plan was not easy. Jonathan and Alexandra wrestled with the implications, knowing that while Evelyn's intentions were pure, the outcome was far from certain. The tension between them grew as they debated the risks and rewards, each moment fraught with the fear of what could go wrong. Yet, in the depths of their doubt, there was a flicker of hope that this unlikely ally might just be the key to their salvation. Jonathan and Evelyn sat together, their minds racing as they crafted a plan that could either save or ruin everything. Evelyn, with her wealth of experience, suggested using her contacts to influence those threatening to expose the secrets that could destroy Jonathan's life. The plan was bold, involving a risky maneuver that would rely on timing and the ability to predict their opponent's moves. Jonathan, desperate for a way out, found himself agreeing, despite knowing the dangers involved. Meanwhile, Alexandra sat alone, torn by the implications of this new strategy. She understood the need for action, but was haunted by the possible consequences. If the plan failed, they could lose everything: reputation, security, even their relationship. The uncertainty gnawed at her, making her question whether they were making the right decision or merely digging themselves deeper into a pit they couldn't escape. Her hesitation was palpable, her emotions a swirl of fear and doubt. As Jonathan explained the details of the plan to Alexandra, her anxiety grew. She wanted to trust Jonathan and Evelyn, but the stakes were so high. The tension between them thickened as they debated the merits and risks of the strategy. Alexandra's reluctance was clear, but with no other options in sight, she felt cornered, forced to support a plan she wasn't fully convinced could succeed. Charles Turner's past resurfaces when an old business partner, once thought to be out of the picture, reappears with unsettling news. This man, who had previously been involved in questionable deals with Charles, now poses a new threat, revealing that he holds key information that could jeopardize the fragile plan Jonathan and Evelyn are trying to implement. The sense of betrayal cuts deep, as Charles realizes the extent of his past mistakes coming back to haunt him, putting everything at risk. Jonathan and Evelyn, who had been confident in their strategy, now face a daunting reality. As they uncover the details of this new threat, they realize that their plan is unraveling faster than they can control. Evelyn, usually composed, shows a rare moment of doubt, her brow furrowing as she tries to think of a way to counter this unexpected twist. The room, filled with tension, feels oppressive as they grasp the seriousness of their situation. Alexandra, already hesitant about the plan, is now even more shaken. She watches Jonathan closely, seeing the strain on his face as he processes the new information. Her fear grows as she considers the possibility that they might not be able to fix the damage caused by this unforeseen complication. Her heart races, knowing that the stakes have just been raised to a level none of them anticipated, and she wonders if there is any way out of this mess. The room filled with a tense silence as the final numbers came in. Jonathan West, usually confident and composed, felt a cold wave of dread wash over him. The strategy they had meticulously crafted to save the company and restore Alexandra's reputation had not only failed, but it had backfired spectacularly. The losses were staggering, and the damage to Alexandra's reputation was irreparable. Jonathan stared at the financial reports, his mind racing with the implications. He knew that the trust he had carefully built with investors and close friends was now shattered. The weight of the failure pressed heavily on his shoulders, and for the first time, doubt crept into his usually determined mind. Evelyn Ross, who had been by Jonathan's side through thick and thin, looked at him with a mixture of concern and frustration. She could see the toll this was taking on him, but she also knew they had no time to dwell on the failure. The investors were already pulling out, their confidence in Jonathan's leadership completely eroded. She tried to offer words of comfort, but they felt hollow, even to her. The once bustling office, filled with plans and energy, now felt like a ghost town, the echoes of their hopes fading into despair. Alexandra Turner, the one whose reputation had been most at stake, sat alone in her office, staring blankly at her reflection in the window. The glamorous and confident image she usually projected felt like a cruel mockery now. She had trusted Jonathan, believed in his ability to pull them through, but now all she could see was the ruin of her career. Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages, likely from those distancing themselves from the impending disaster, but she couldn't bring herself to respond. The future, once bright and full of promise, now seemed bleak and uncertain. Jonathan West's once confident demeanor began to crumble under the weight of his failures. As the days passed, he found himself increasingly isolated, retreating to the solitude of his office. The silence that once provided clarity now felt oppressive, amplifying his sense of despair. He avoided calls and meetings, pushing away even those who had been his closest allies. The walls of his office, adorned with symbols of past successes, now seemed to close in on him, suffocating any remnants of hope. Jonathan's piercing blue eyes, once full of determination, were now clouded with self-doubt and regret. Each passing moment deepened his sense of isolation, making the burden of his mistakes almost unbearable. Meanwhile, Alexandra Turner, who had placed her trust and reputation in Jonathan's hands, could no longer face the truth. The failure had shattered not just her professional life, but also her confidence. She began to distance herself from Jonathan, avoiding any confrontation that might force her to acknowledge the extent of their downfall. Her once vibrant presence faded, replaced by a deep-seated fear of what was to come. Alexandra's interactions became mechanical, her vibrant green eyes now dulled by anxiety and uncertainty. She knew she needed to step away, but the thought of doing so filled her with an overwhelming sense of dread. The growing distance between Jonathan and Alexandra only served to exacerbate their individual struggles. Both were trapped in their own spirals of despair, unable to reach out to the other for support. The partnership that once seemed unbreakable was now strained to its breaking point, each retreating further into their own worlds of fear and regret. The atmosphere around them grew increasingly tense, a stark contrast to the optimism that had once defined their collaboration. Alexandra had been carrying a heavy burden for years, a secret that gnawed at her every day. It was a scandal from her past that had been buried deep, but it was time to bring it to light. Her family's fortune, once vast and secure, had been destroyed by a series of poor decisions and shady deals she was involved in during her early years. She had been young and ambitious, caught in a whirlwind of greed and bad advice. The collapse was swift and devastating, leaving her family in ruins and her reputation tainted. As she finally confessed this to Jonathan, her voice trembled with the weight of the truth. Her striking green eyes were filled with a mixture of regret and relief, knowing that the secret she had kept hidden for so long was now out in the open. Jonathan listened in stunned silence, struggling to process what he had just heard. The image he had of Alexandra was shattered in an instant, replaced by a complex reality he had never imagined. Yet, as the initial shock subsided, a sense of relief began to wash over him. The pieces of her guarded nature, the hesitations, and the fear that seemed to linger behind her confident facade all started to make sense. He realized that knowing the truth, as painful as it was, brought them closer to a place of understanding. His blue eyes softened as he watched her, acknowledging the courage it took for her to reveal such a painful chapter of her life. The atmosphere in the room was tense, yet there was an underlying sense of catharsis. Alexandra, who had always been seen as poised and unbreakable, now stood before Jonathan vulnerable and exposed. This moment of honesty was a turning point, not just for their relationship, but for the way they would approach the challenges ahead. Though the road was still uncertain, there was a newfound clarity between them, a shared understanding that they would face whatever came next together. Jonathan, armed with the truth revealed by Alexandra, decides to confront the challenges head-on. He knows that the only way to overcome the obstacles is to be transparent and use this newfound knowledge as leverage. However, as he begins to reach out to the key players involved, he faces immediate resistance. Charles's former partner, a man with deep ties in the business world and a reputation for ruthlessness, emerges as a formidable adversary. This man is not just concerned with protecting his own interests, but is also determined to prevent Jonathan from restoring the tarnished reputation of Alexandra's family. His influence is vast, and he uses it to block every move Jonathan tries to make, creating an environment of hostility and suspicion. Despite the mounting pressure, Jonathan remains determined. He reaches out to the public, attempting to sway societal opinion by presenting the truth. However, society is not so easily convinced. Rumors and old scandals resurface, and the public is quick to judge. The media, always hungry for sensational stories, twists the narrative, further complicating Jonathan's efforts. He finds himself battling not just a powerful individual, but also a collective skepticism that threatens to drown out the truth. The resistance is fierce, and every step forward seems to be met with 2 steps back. The tension escalates as Jonathan realizes that he is more isolated than ever. The support he thought he could rely on begins to wane, and even those who were once allies start to distance themselves, fearing the repercussions of being associated with him. Jonathan, now facing threats from all sides, begins to question whether he can truly overcome these challenges. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, there is a flicker of resolve within him. He knows that giving up is not an option, but the path forward is fraught with uncertainty and danger. Jonathan, now facing immense pressure, begins to notice the cracks in his support system. Those who once stood by him, including Evelyn, start to question his judgment and the choices he's made. Evelyn, who had always been a pillar of strength and wisdom, expresses her concerns more openly. She sees Jonathan's determination as stubbornness and fears that his relentless pursuit of the truth might be leading them all toward ruin. Her voice, once calming and supportive, now carries a tone of doubt and hesitation. Jonathan feels this shift acutely, realizing that the confidence he once inspired in his allies is eroding. As rumors and tensions spread, Jonathan's business partners grow increasingly uneasy. They begin to distance themselves, citing concerns about the company's future and their own reputations. Meetings that were once filled with collaboration and mutual respect become tense and strained. Jonathan is left defending his decisions alone, with fewer and fewer people willing to listen. The board members, once his closest advisors, start to question whether they can continue to follow his lead. The isolation becomes palpable, and Jonathan struggles to maintain control over a company he built from the ground up. At home, the situation is no better. His marriage, already strained by the pressures of his professional life, begins to crumble. Alexandra, overwhelmed by the constant scrutiny and the toll it has taken on their lives, becomes distant. The connection they once shared feels like a distant memory. Jonathan's attempts to communicate and reconnect with her are met with silence or cold indifference. The home that once offered solace now feels like a battleground, further deepening Jonathan's sense of isolation. He is left alone, grappling with the reality that everything he has fought for is slipping through his fingers. Jonathan finds himself alone in his office late at night, the weight of his decisions pressing down on him like never before. The once confident and determined man now sits in silence, reflecting on the choices that led him to this point. He contemplates giving up, feeling that perhaps he has pushed too far and lost too much. The thought of letting go of everything he's fought for crosses his mind, as the doubts planted by his former allies and the crumbling of his personal life become overwhelming. The room is dimly lit, mirroring his state of mind, dark and filled with uncertainty. In this moment of deep reflection, Evelyn enters. Her presence is unexpected but comforting. She sits across from Jonathan, her face soft with concern but also with a quiet strength. Evelyn, who had earlier questioned his decisions, now speaks with a gentle yet firm resolve. She reminds him of the person he was before all the chaos, the man who inspired others with his vision and unwavering commitment. Evelyn's words cut through the fog of despair that surrounds Jonathan, making him reconsider his thoughts of abandonment. She speaks of the importance of perseverance and the need to see things through, even when the outcome seems bleak. As they talk, Jonathan begins to see a glimmer of hope, a possibility that perhaps not all is lost. Evelyn's calm and reassuring demeanor helps him realize that he still has a choice, that giving up now would mean surrendering not only his ambitions, but also the principles he has always stood by. Their conversation, though brief, is deeply significant, as it reignites a spark of determination within Jonathan. He understands that the road ahead will not be easy, but he feels a renewed sense of purpose. This moment becomes a turning point, where he decides to face the challenges ahead rather than flee from them. Jonathan begins to see the pieces of the puzzle that had eluded him. As he revisits past conversations and moments, small details start to emerge, forming a pattern that was previously hidden in plain sight. He recalls subtle hints from Evelyn, the way she hesitated during certain discussions, and how Brandon seemed unusually keen on specific issues. These memories, once overlooked, now appear as significant clues that had been scattered throughout his journey. Jonathan's mind races as he connects these dots, realizing that the solution to his predicament might have been within reach all along, hidden beneath the surface of the chaos. Flashbacks reveal these moments with newfound clarity. He remembers a brief comment made by Evelyn during a tense meeting, something about a backdoor in the system, which at the time seemed irrelevant. Another memory surfaces, Brandon mentioning a minor but persistent problem in the company's operations that no one had paid attention to. Jonathan recalls how Alexandra once mentioned a key figure who had quietly withdrawn from a deal. Each of these moments now takes on a new meaning, as if the fog has lifted and allowed him to see the truth that was always there. The solution isn't about finding something new, but rather understanding the significance of what he already knows. With this new understanding, Jonathan's despair starts to wane. The pieces of the puzzle fit together in his mind, revealing a path forward that he hadn't considered before. It's not a simple fix, but it's a start, a way to potentially reclaim what he thought was lost. He realizes that the answers lie not in grand gestures, but in the careful, deliberate unraveling of the clues he had been given all along. This newfound clarity brings a sense of cautious hope, setting the stage for what comes next. Jonathan stands in his once grand office, now filled with the remnants of a shattered empire. Papers are strewn across his desk, and the walls that once displayed his achievements now seem to close in on him. His business is on the brink of collapse, with financial ruin looming over every decision he makes. His mind races as he grapples with the overwhelming reality that all he has worked for is slipping through his fingers. The pressure has become unbearable, and the weight of his responsibilities crushes him. Jonathan's thoughts are a chaotic mix of desperation and resignation, as he wonders if this is the end of everything he has built. The tension spills into his personal life, with his marriage to Alexandra hanging by a thread. The distance between them has grown insurmountable, and every conversation turns into a confrontation. In one particularly heated exchange, Alexandra, with tears in her eyes, demands to know why Jonathan has let everything fall apart. The once loving bond they shared is now strained to the breaking point, and Jonathan realizes that he is not just losing his business but his family as well. He feels utterly powerless, unable to fix what has gone so horribly wrong, and the fear of losing Alexandra becomes as real as the impending financial ruin. As the realization sinks in, Jonathan finds himself on the brink of giving up entirely. The fight within him seems to drain away, replaced by a numbing acceptance of his fate. He sits alone in his office, staring at the wreckage of his life, contemplating whether there is any point in continuing the struggle. The future appears bleak, and for the first time, Jonathan genuinely believes that there may be no way out. The thought of failure, both in his career and his personal life, overwhelms him, leaving him feeling more isolated and defeated than ever before. Jonathan, overwhelmed by the impending collapse of his life and business, sits in silence, lost in despair. The tension in the room is palpable as Alexandra enters, her expression determined yet calm. Jonathan barely notices her at first, too absorbed in his thoughts of failure. But Alexandra, with a firm yet gentle tone, begins to speak, revealing a plan she had secretly been working on for months. Jonathan listens, disbelief slowly turning into hope as she explains how she had anticipated the worst and had quietly prepared a strategy to save not only the business but their marriage as well. As Alexandra unfolds the details, Jonathan starts to connect the dots. Flashbacks of seemingly insignificant moments, a late-night phone call, a hastily signed document, her unexplained absences, now make sense. Each had been a part of Alexandra's intricate plan, a plan that she had crafted with precision and care to protect their future. The realization that Alexandra had been quietly fighting for their survival all along strikes Jonathan deeply, filling him with a mixture of relief, gratitude, and admiration for his wife. The tension that had gripped him for so long begins to ease, replaced by a cautious optimism. With Alexandra's plan in motion, the tide begins to turn. The first steps are small but significant: secured funding, strategic partnerships, and key decisions that had been put in place without Jonathan's knowledge now come to light. As they work together, their relationship begins to heal, the bond between them strengthening in the face of adversity. The once bleak future now seems bright, and Jonathan, inspired by Alexandra's strength and foresight, regains his confidence. The story concludes with the couple standing side by side, ready to face whatever comes next, their love and partnership stronger than ever. As the first light of dawn breaks, Jonathan and Alexandra sit together in the quiet of their living room, reflecting on the whirlwind of events that had brought them to this moment. The once insurmountable challenges now feel like distant memories, obstacles that they had not only overcome but had learned from. Jonathan, feeling a deep sense of gratitude, looks at Alexandra with newfound admiration. The woman who had silently fought for their future had not only saved their business but had also reignited the love and partnership between them. Alexandra, no longer burdened by the secrets she had kept, feels a profound sense of peace and fulfillment. The business, once teetering on the edge of collapse, is now thriving, a testament to their resilience and the strength of their bond. Jonathan's confidence has returned, not as the unshakable arrogance of his past, but as a humble understanding of the value of teamwork, trust, and love. The company's revival mirrors the revival of their relationship, both stronger and more united than ever before. The days of doubt and despair have given way to a new era of hope and possibility. As they prepare for the day ahead, there's a quiet understanding between them, a shared resolve to cherish the lessons learned and to never take each other for granted again. They stand side by side, ready to face the future together, knowing that whatever challenges may come, they will face them as a team. The story of their struggle and triumph is not just a tale of survival, but a reminder of the power of love, trust, and perseverance. The happiness that now fills their lives is hard-earned and deeply cherished, a new beginning that promises to be even more beautiful than the past. Final revelations. Where are they now? Jonathan West. Years after the events that nearly shattered his life, Jonathan West has emerged not only as a successful businessman, but also as a deeply fulfilled individual. He now runs a thriving enterprise that has expanded into new markets. Yet he remains grounded, remembering the lessons learned during the most challenging period of his life. Jonathan is known for his philanthropy, often contributing to causes that support entrepreneurs facing difficulties. He is frequently seen enjoying peaceful walks through the city's parks, reflecting on how far he's come. His appearance has matured with grace. His hair, slightly graying at the temples, adds to his dignified look, and his posture is one of calm confidence. Alexandra Turner. Alexandra has found a renewed sense of purpose in her life. After successfully helping Jonathan save his company, she transitioned into a role that aligns with her passion for supporting others. She now leads a foundation that provides mentorship and financial assistance to women entrepreneurs, empowering them to achieve their dreams. Alexandra's life is filled with joy and contentment, shared with Jonathan, as they continue to grow both individually and as a couple. Her style remains elegant, yet it now reflects a softer, more relaxed approach to life, with flowing dresses and understated accessories that speak to her inner peace. Brandon Cole. Brandon, who played a pivotal role in guiding Jonathan through his darkest moments, has returned to his roots as a motivational speaker and life coach. His wisdom and empathy have made him a sought-after figure for those seeking direction in their lives.
This story taught me that even in our darkest moments, the quiet strength of love and resilience can guide us toward a brighter, more meaningful future. How did you come across this story? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And if you're interested in more unforgettable cases, click on the video on your screen. See you there.